The ACC race turned out to be a pretty fun one in 2024. What will 2025 give us? Well, we're going to give you the projected records here in this video. And I did about half the teams in the ACC. I did individual videos for those teams. We're going to go back and check those out and see exactly how we got to the projections that we got to. About half of them we didn't get to. I apologize. It was my intent to do every team. It just didn't work out this year. But we're going to recap it all and show you what the projected records would look like, and show you the importance of scheduling, because there are some teams that are in the same tier that have projected records 2 games apart. And again, this is all based off of how difficult these schedules are. So if you haven't watched the other videos, these projections based off of our tier rankings, and then also how difficult the schedule is. So it gives you a projection. Again, it's a conservative way to do this. We group all these teams, or not all these teams, we group teams together into different tiers. And if you play a team in the same tier, it's like a 50-50 game. If you play a team in a tier below you, the percentage changes from there. So let's jump in first before we get to the projections. These are the schedules. Again, the difficulties of the schedules based off the 2024 records, which I think that doesn't tell the whole story, because I think you're going to see a bit of change in the ACC. You're going to see teams that will be a good bit better and be a good bit worse from where they were last year. But based off of the 2024 records, these are the winning percentages of the opponents for 2025. You see Syracuse with the toughest schedule. Their opponents went 41-23 in 2024. Again, this is clearly the toughest schedule. And then you look at Virginia and Virginia Tech on the other side with the easiest schedules, 42% winning percentage for their opponents this year. Yeah, they've got very easy schedules. And look at Virginia, by the way, because that one really is going to stand out, because their non-conference schedule is pretty easy as well. And you're going to see that represented here in the projection. But yeah, that's how difficult the schedules are, again, based off of the records from last year. Let's get into it now, and we're going to start at the top. Now, I did include Notre Dame in this video just because we don't have a conference to do them. So yeah, just throwing that out there. 10-2, they would be the best team, or have the best record in the ACC. I, of course, did a video on Notre Dame if you want to go check it out. So then behind them, really the top teams in the ACC, these teams figure to be the favorites. It's Clemson and Miami. Both of these teams projected to go 9-3. I think that's low for Clemson. I know their schedule is pretty tough. You got LSU in the non-conference, you got South Carolina, and that's why the projection is what it is. But boy, I really think this team's going to be good this year. The more I look at their roster, the more I think Clemson could be, possibly even a top 5 team this year. And I really believe that. So yeah, Clemson and Miami at the top. Miami, I think, has more question marks. Carson Beck coming in. Which Carson Beck will we see? We've seen him at times look like an elite quarterback. Other times we've seen him look very average. And then the pieces around him, how it all come together. Miami will be very interesting. But again, based off the projected records, and these are the overall records, not necessarily the conference records, because I think Clemson is overwhelmingly a favorite to get to the ACC championship. Because like I said, they got some tough non-conference games. They could lose a couple of those, still go 9-3 and only have 1 loss in the conference, and get to the ACC championship game. So to me, Clemson is the favorite, with these 2 teams projected with the highest records in the conference, 9-3, or in terms of conference teams. Then we go to teams projected to go 8-4, and you see Georgia Tech, Louisville, SMU, and Virginia. And there's Virginia. I was just talking about them a second ago. So yeah, Georgia Tech projected to have a pretty good season at 8-4. Louisville, SMU. Now these teams are all in that same tier, so that's it kind of makes sense that they would be here. Virginia is in a tier below them, but they have an 8-4 projection because of their schedule. When you look at Virginia's schedule, their non-conference is Coastal Carolina, William and Mary, Washington State. That's who they play in the non-conference. So a very easy non-conference schedule for them. You look at who they play in the ACC. It's just really not that tough of a schedule. They don't have to play Clemson. They don't play, I know they're not in the ACC technically, but they don't play Notre Dame. They don't play Miami. It's just a really, really favorable schedule for them. Again, William and Mary, Coastal Carolina, and Washington State. I'm not sure. I'm looking at the schedule here. I'm not even sure who the other non-conference opponent is. Perhaps they're playing one of these games, one of their conference opponents is a non-conference game. I'll have to look into that. But anyways, it's a very favorable schedule for Virginia, as you see them coming out with a an 8-4 projection, even though they're in a tier below these other teams. So very interesting to see Virginia that high. Could this be a breakout team this year? I think they're going to be pretty good. Are they going to be good enough to contend? I think that's going to be tough. I don't really see that happening, but you never know. And again, their schedule gives them a chance. But yeah, Georgia Tech, Louisville, SMU, they're right where you'd expect them to be. I think these are your dark horse teams in the conference, behind Clemson and Miami. And maybe Virginia's in that category. I don't know. But 8-4 is their projection. Next, we go to teams that are projected to go 7-5. We got North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Virginia Tech. Perhaps we could see a dark horse team out of this group. I don't know. I know Bill Belichick in North Carolina, some hype around them, but I don't think they're going to do it year one. I think North Carolina will be pretty good this year, but not really contenders. Pittsburgh, started off so good last year, then kind of fell apart late. We'll see where they wind up. And Virginia Tech, they've got, again, one of those easier schedules in the ACC, so that bodes well for them. But when you look at Virginia Tech's non-conference schedule, they do play South Carolina and they play Vanderbilt. So you've got a couple of SEC teams in the non-conference for them. But these teams all projected to go 7-5 and should easily make it to a bowl game. Then we go to those teams that are right on the bubble. Maybe they get up to a bowl game, maybe they don't, and they're all projected to go 6-6. And you got 5 of these. You got Cal, Duke, Florida State, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. So a couple of interesting things here. Cal, Duke, and Florida State, all in the same tier. Syracuse is in a tier above them. They're in that tier with Virginia, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech. But their schedule is really tough, so that's why their projection drops to 6-6. But Wake Forest is actually in a tier below these teams, but their projection is 6-6 because of an easier schedule. So the schedule definitely comes into play here. You look at the non-conference schedule for Wake Forest. They play Kennesaw State, Western Carolina. They play Oregon State, could be a little bit tricky, and then Delaware. So you're talking about two. I know Kennesaw State just moved to FBS, but if they were still FCS, this team would have 3 FCS opponents on the schedule. So it's a really easy schedule for Wake Forest. They may need an easy schedule this year because they do, figure to be one of the worst teams in this conference. But that is interesting to see that all the way up at 6-6 when you'll see a team that's in the same tier as them in a second. It's only projected to go 4-8. Just shows you the difference a schedule can make. Could we see a breakout team out of these? Cal, Duke, Florida State, Syracuse. I was looking at Duke. They've got some key pieces coming back on defense. They could be sneaky this year. And then Florida State, a lot of roster turnover, coaching changes. Gus Malzahn steps in as offensive coordinator. That's a team to watch, I think, as a team to really make a big jump forward this year as well. And actually, this would be a drop for Duke based off the season they had last year. So maybe they do get back to kind of where they were last year. Next, we go to teams 5 and 7. Boston College and NC State. I think this is fair for Boston College. Not a whole lot to get excited about that team. With that team. Now, NC State, I know they were bad last year, but if you know Dave Dorn, you know this program, you don't really expect them to be down again. You would expect them to be more like 7-5 this year. So I was surprised to see this 5-7 projection for NC State. But that is where they wound up. Again, teams that they're in the same tier. They're in the same tier with some of those teams that were projected to go 6-6. So this I think the schedule does have a lot to do with this. They play Notre Dame. That's always going to make the schedule tougher, obviously. Not a conference game, even though they do have that affiliation with the ACC. But yeah, you look at that game against Notre Dame, that's going to be a tough one. I think that's what really makes the schedule tougher for them and makes it to where NC State could possibly go 5-7. You got road games against Pitt, Miami. So it's a tricky schedule for them. But again, I think knowing this program, NC State has a good chance to do better than that. But finally, we have Stanford. So Stanford projected to go 4-8. Like I said, same tier as Wake Forest, but projected to finish 2 games below them. That tells you how easy the schedule is for Wake Forest and how tough it is for Stanford. Stanford has to play BYU on the road. That will obviously be a tough one. And then Notre Dame in the non-conference. So a really tough schedule for Stanford as they finish with the worst projected record at just 4-8. Do you guys agree with these projections? Again, there's some that I think are pretty fair. Some I think will be off by a couple of games maybe. But with our formula, this is what you get. And so again, give me your thoughts, your projections on the ACC down in the comments below.